Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, out here grinding collegiate sports with you from a DFS betting, everything in between that you could possibly think of. We get those green screens on the DFS sides. We walk those window trips up on the betting side. We had an absolute blast the last couple of days with the CFB playoff semifinals. Notre Dame taking on Ohio State in the championship game. One more college football slate. Crazy profitable stretch for us. I'm very happy, very pleased with the community, and very happy to see everybody enjoying themselves as well. But we are here for a massive slate of college basketball. There are a ton of games, 120 plus on Saturday, 3 full slates on DraftKings, with the primary focus tonight being the 12-game main. There is also a 12-game afternoon, and then there is an 8-game night slate. Tons of contests, tons of games, tons of betting opportunity. Our man Mike Randall will be here tomorrow morning live on the FTN YouTube channel, breaking down all the betting action and his preferred stuff, so make sure you check that out. I'm going to be going through and doing my DFS breakdown, but I also have some prize picks and betting opportunities that I am feeling pretty good about, very fond of. Before we get started, if you are new to the channel or a repeat viewer, I appreciate you just the same. Please make sure you hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube. Those interactions certainly help us a great deal. If you're watching on X/Twitter, a retweet, repost, and any comments, questions, concerns, anything at all helps the show a tremendous amount. With that being said, let's get ourselves into it. Hey, my man, up late, Tubby in the house here. Yeah, doing the late night thing. I usually do the shows at like 9 p.m. my time, but lately it's been 10 or 11. But yeah, we're night owls around here. We just get a couple hours sleep here, and then we get up and then we do our thing. All right, let's get into this 12-game slate, starting off with USC versus Illinois. Such a strange thing to see USC, the Trojans, playing at what basically their body clock is going to be telling them 9 a.m. on the road against Illinois. I've said several times, this is quite like a West Coast all the way to the deep East Coast or anything, but still it's tough. And it's been an adjustment for all of the West Coast teams, including my Washington Huskies. And those trips from, the West Coast to the Midwest and especially into the East Coast and early games have been tough. This USC team might be in for a big letdown here. The spread is 14 points in favor of Illinois, total of 154. The Illini, they've looked fantastic. My Huskies pushed them at home, nearly had them, would have been such a huge win, but the Illini escaped with an 81-77 win there. They have not lost since mid-December, which was a 2-point home loss to the Tennessee Volunteers, and then an overtime loss before that against Northwestern. 7th in defensive efficiency, 19th in offensive efficiency, 12-3 campaign under Brad Underwood. When Brad Underwood got to the Illini back in, 2018, they were not quite a laughingstock program by any means, but long gone were the days of D. Brown and the Deron Williams and all the other fun stuff and Final Four and championship appearances that they had. It was rough. And his first season, he was 14-18. They did not look particularly well, but he's rebuilt this thing. Had Trent Frazier forever. Long live the legacy of Trent Frazier. And he's turned this thing around quickly after 2 seasons in the losing column, 12-20, 14-18. He's now won since the COVID season 20 or more times, on his way to winning 20 plus more in this campaign, and arguably might be one of the best Illini teams he's ever had. And that goes back to looking at last year when they finished 29-9 with Terry Shannon and Marcus Domask, and Coleman Hawkins, the fearsome trio that they were. But I really like this Illini team, and they're still got a bit of youth to them as well. All that to say, I think USC is going to get absolutely smoked here. On the Trojan side, it's kind of the calling card here of Eric Musselman teams, all his Arkansas squads. He runs a fairly deep rotation. We have seen him start to narrow things down a bit. We have 4 players playing 30-plus minutes over the last 3, so we're kind of getting that rotation down. The 5th player in that rotation has kind of rotated in and out, so that's a little harder to figure out. But right now, Chibuzo, Agbo, St. Thomas, Wesley Yates, should have stayed with Washington, and Des Cloud. Those guys are all playing 30-plus. Then you see Josh Cohen start. He plays about 10 to 15 minutes. I've mentioned this before. He's not very good in the defending the pick and roll. He's not very versatile, so he's just not able to stay on the floor defensively. So you see guys like Kevin Patton come in there, Rashawn Agee, who I think is the best player to have that 5th spot, Clark, Slade-Jart, Harrison Hornery, like all these rotating pieces. Bryce Pope we've seen in there. Really, you just want to stick to the top 4 on USC if you're going to go that direction. We've seen Bryce Pope play 25 minutes, then play 3, bit some people. We just saw it last slate. Kevin Patton, he played just 12 minutes and had about 25% ownership after he played 28 minutes the game before that against Michigan. You just cannot trust anyone outside of the 4 that I have mentioned. Pricing-wise, you get some pretty cheapies here. Wesley Yates at 5'8" is very playable. Agbo at 6'2", taking a ton of shots, ton of threes. He can certainly get there on his scoring alone at that price. And then St. Thomas and Des Cloud, both under 7K. They're certainly viable there. I just don't love the spot. St. Thomas is probably going to be relatively chalky at 6'4", even on a 12-game slate. We've seen him pull a lot of ownership when under 7K, but I just don't know that this is a game where he blasts off for 35-plus. Even 30, let alone. The Illinois side definitely has some interest. The forearm injury for the freshman guard there, Kasparas Jakutunis, that's going to be a tough one. He missed last game. I think he does play here. He's been out for, roughly 4 days time. But I think he'll be limited. So meaning that he's going to start, do his thing, but probably not play the typical 30 to 35 minutes we're accustomed to seeing him. Probably more like 20 to 25 just to get him out there. They have other guys who can step in and fill these roles like we saw. I mean, they didn't have him against Penn State, and they beat the hell out of Penn State. And Penn State, prior to the start of this new year, looked like they could be an outside dark horse team for a tournament bid, and they lost 91-52 against a shorthanded Illinois team. Yes, they were missing Puff Johnson, but come on. So I wouldn't be playing him at the 9.4 price because I think he'll be limited. But there is plenty of options here we can look at. Kylan Boswell is a little spendy for me at 8.6. He's been great, but Jesus, that's a very expensive price. To start the season, we weren't even looking at him. It took a little bit there to even get to want to pay 5K for him. 8.6 is just a very, very hefty tag. We do have Tomislav Ivicevic at 7.7. It's been a little bit lackluster, under 30 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. Foul issues have kind of reared their ugly head here, but he is getting solid minutes. The price has come down considerably, puts him back into play here going up against a USC front court that I think will have a hard time defending him because he is versatile. Trey White is there at 6'5". He's been solid 3 straight games over 26 DK points. With Kasparas being limited, I think Trey White definitely sees more usage. He's continued to take double-digit shots in 3 straight. He's rebounding at an extremely high level. I don't know if those rebounding numbers can continue, but definitely a solid play there, and probably out of their top 4, the best overall option that we can look at. Will Riley, in and out, 18 to 22 minutes, not great. Ben Humrichius at 5'8", might look like a decent play. We know how good he did last year in the Missouri Valley. Did put up nearly 40 against Penn State, which may pull some people over there, 21-9, but he's definitely struggled overall against some of this upper tier competition. He did put up 18 real against Oregon, so definitely a fine play if you want to go there at 5'8". I'm just not super comfortable with him. And then you got my man Morez Johnson, a little pricey at 5'4" after he dropped a near 40. The biggest benefactor there of the blowout and missing Kasparas. He was fantastic, 20-11. He has immense upside. He's going to be such a stud next year. When some of these other guys are gone, and he might not even make it to next year. He may be like having to force his way in the starting lineup, or at least start playing 25-plus minutes. Fantasy point per minute number is great. His overall rates are fantastic. He's just been a very solid option, and now the rest of the world gets to see just how good he was based off that game there. Wouldn't chase it at 5.4. If he was still at like 4.5, 4.8, somewhere in that range, I'd be interested. But I don't want to get. I'm really worried about using him and getting Flory Badungdud. We know Underwood will use Morez, unlike Bill Self, who refuses to use freshmen sometimes. Flory has had really good production lately, but he played under 18 minutes in their last game, bricked out at 5.4, and I'm just a little bit worried that could happen to Morez. If Kasparas can't go and he's ruled out, I would certainly have more interest. Yes, it's a different position, but minutes, usage, opportunities are all there. And then at 4.7, you have Dra Gibbs Lawhorn, who's played 20-plus minutes in 3 straight games. All right, moving on to the next one. We have Notre Dame versus Duke. Duke, a big favorite, 19.5, 130.5, 135.5 total here. Delirious. Notre Dame has Marcus Burton back, so that's great. He's priced only at 7.4. He was majorly chalky there against NC State. He was a little rusty, shot 5 of 15, but the volume was there. Came off the bench against North Carolina the game before that, took 14 shots. So he's absolutely chucking. We know that. We didn't get a lot of peripherals out of him in either game. He's been a pretty solid guy as far as his assist rate goes, but he definitely had to shake off some rust. Doesn't get any easier when you're talking about Cameron Indoor Arena against the defense of Duke. Am taking a little bit of a step back on Burton. I have to say that, yes, that price is fantastic, but this is also a 12-game slate, not a 3-game, 2-game, or 4-game slate. So we don't have to feel inclined to play a guy who, yes, his buy low opportunity is high, but the matchup for him individually absolutely sucks. Zion James and Tyrese Proctor are going to be giving him fits. Tay Davis is an extremely good price at 6.6. We'll leave him there and let him get into foul trouble and struggle. And let that price drop even further. In the next Notre Dame slate, we'll snatch him up. He's still playing pretty well with Burton around. Something's clicked for him without Burton. He's become more of an alpha. Tay Davis has always shown upside in the past, and now he's really taken off. That price dump to 6.6 is really interesting, but it does feel a little bit trappy. And then the only other option really to talk about here, Braden Shrewsbury, playing basically the entire game. He's also taken a ton of shots. Between Burton, Davis, and Shrewsbury, you're looking at 80% of this team's shots being flung up there. Metalloco still played 37 minutes with Burton around. Makes him a little interesting at 5.7, but that one to me feels like it's just a little too cute. Don't want to go there necessarily myself. And then Keba Njai, who will be needed for his size against his Duke front court at 5K. He did play 34 minutes against NC State, had a double-double, 10 and 11. That one is somewhat interesting, but definitely not a safe play. On the Duke side, we have a ton of guys projecting well. Prices are all relatively cheap except for Cooper Flagg. And even at the 10.5K price, I do like Cooper Flagg. Man, he's just one of those dudes that, he had a rough start in the first half against Pittsburgh. His ownership was kind of moderate. And people tweeting me like, oh, Flagg's bricking. What are we going to do? And he ended at 43, 19 and 10 with 5 assists, 1 block, 1 steal, hit a 3. Just Cooper Flagg is an absolute stud. This slate definitely has some value pieces to where we can get to Cooper Flagg on his very own team, in fact. And he's definitely one of the higher end pay-ups that I want to have exposure to. So I've had more success over the years with balanced lineups, and lately we've been able to do so, and we've had some really positive results. Whereas yesterday we went with a more studs and scrubs build. It was a shorter slate and got absolutely slapped in the mouth. So I'm going to try and go balanced here where possible, and on this team we can definitely do so. Con Knipples there at 6K. Started off the season real hot. We were using him all the time. Then his price kind of ballooned a little bit, and then he hit that freshman wall, but it seems as though they've been able to go over that a bit. They've had a favorable start to the conference schedule against the likes of Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, SMU, and Pittsburgh, and that has allowed him to kind of settle in and really get up to speed here when it comes to ACC basketball. Especially impressed with his 4 for 8 shooting against Georgia Tech a few weeks ago. Also shot 4 for 7 from downtown against Pitt and 3 from 8 against SMU. Flagg is getting a lot of defensive attention, as you would imagine, and he is kicking it out, and Knipple is not missing. So at 6K, he's a great option, and he's got guard forward eligibility like Cooper Flagg. Zion James at 5'9". He's a little spendy there, but definitely in play against a Notre Dame team that I expect him to force some turnovers against, so I don't hate that idea one bit. And then you have the 2 very playable options in Tyrese Proctor at 5'5", who has really settled into a safe role. His price isn't really moving much. People aren't rostering him very much, but he's playing 30 to 33 minutes, regardless of it being a blowout or not. And he's contributing across all categories. 13, 4 and 4, 14, 6 and 3, 13, 2 and 5. Like, these are all stat lines that I'm happy to embrace with a 5.5K player. So Proctor is most likely going to be my highest exposed Duke player. Very high main team play for me as well. And then come on, Malowak. He's played 25 minutes in back-to-back games. That's because SMU and Pittsburgh did have some size. Notre Dame, maybe not. They've got size, but they're kind of weak. They're kind of weak front court. So I don't know that Kaman will be needed for those kind of minutes. His overall upside is down, but the price of 5.2 definitely is a 4x possibility. And if you're not able to get the flag, you want some Duke exposure, you want to get a little different and still have safety in your lineup, Malowak is definitely a great way to do that. It's not going to be getting these heavy minutes. Fouls are obviously always a risk, but when I look at that Notre Dame front court, nothing scares me. I think he's going to be able to bully them a little bit. The only problem is some of those Notre Dame bigs are versatile enough to shoot. I don't know if Kaman's able to step out there on them. So we may lose some minutes there defensively. We may see some additional time for Mason Gillis, maybe a little Malik Brown, guys like that, definitely a possibility. And Caleb Foster's all the way down there at 3.5. I just keep waiting any day for the transfer portal news to hit for him. If he plays 15 to 18 minutes, he pays off this 3.5, but I'm just not so sure. Shot attempts aren't there for him, and he's really just kind of like fallen all the way down to the bottom of the pecking order, which is a little bit surprising considering he was a starter at the beginning of the year. All right, moving on to the next game here, we have Louisville versus Pittsburgh. Hey, got some comments in the chat here, my man T9. Up late, yes, sir. Appreciate it. The Joker is with us. Ooh, that's a scary picture. With the new graphic that I have up here, when I put comments up, it blows up the profile pic. That's a scary one. What up, though? All right, moving on. We got Louisville versus Pittsburgh. The Panthers are 4-point favorites, total of 149.5. We got Louisville here at +4. That is a to me, a strong bet. I love what Louisville's been doing. What a difference a year makes. What a difference it makes when you have an actual good coach. No disrespect intended when I say that for one Kenny Payne, who is a Louisville legend. But, man, sometimes you just can't coach players who are really good. Patrick Ewing, man, on the court, dominate, but you just can't coach. And there's no shame in it. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Pat Kelsey can coach. He is phenomenal. I love Pat Kelsey. He is great, and he is very likable. And this Louisville team, despite the injuries that they've had, are 11-5. They've won 3 straight conference games, actually 4 straight, against the likes of Florida State, North Carolina, Virginia, and Clemson. That's a big win, a 10-point home win against Clemson. Massive. They blew out Virginia by 20 on their floor, which is ridiculous. A 13-point win against North Carolina, and then a double-digit win against Florida State. This is a team that's 11-5 despite missing several key pieces that they brought in. You have to imagine or wonder how good could this team possibly be if Corin Johnson, another Husky, great, could have been a Husky, great, was healthy. Kashawn Pryor was healthy. Ali Khalifa didn't redshirt. There's just so much goodness on this team and the way that they attack the portal. You see some teams that got guys in from the portal, they didn't put that team together properly. Louisville definitely did, and they're shorthanded and still winning games. Looking at the box there from the Clemson game, Chucky Hepburn, Siobhan Hadley, Terrence Edwards, all playing 30-plus minutes. We can expect that to continue. Noah Waterman and James Scott are the other 2 starters, with Rain Smith and Abakor Traore, who is now healthy, being the primary bench pieces. We sometimes see Connie Ruths, but not much. He's a freshman and hit a little bit of wall. So we're really seeing a 6 to 7-man rotation for this team, and you'd expect them to gas out, but it hasn't happened yet. The Pittsburgh perimeter is definitely opportunistic and a bit aggressive, borderline violent at times. So that will be a question mark here for this Louisville team if they can stay out of foul trouble and play through the physicality that Pitt sometimes shows. Hitting shots is a good way to demoralize Pitt quickly. Louisville definitely has guys that can do that. Chucky Hepburn is a little pricey at 8.5 still. He settled into a very solid 28 to 30 fantasy point per game guy. Definitely don't mind. He only shot 1 of 10 against Clemson, but he scored nearly 30. Those peripherals are strong. He has a massive steal rate and a great assist rate. So you can count on Chucky if you want. Javon Hadley's a little pricey for my money. He did put 54 on the table against Clemson, which was 32, 10, and 4. That's typically not going to happen. You'll see that he's mostly a 20 to 22 fantasy point game guy. I don't know that people will chase that. I think they're a little more intelligent, but definitely has upside. He's shown it. I would like to get exposure to Louisville, but I'm coming down here to the range of my man James Scott, who is priced at 5K, projects extremely well, and doesn't have the flash, the glitz, the glamour of some of these other guys on here, but he continues a workman-like level of production. 11 and 8 against North Carolina. That was the game where I was like, man, Terrence Edwards should grab some rebounds here. He struggled. James Scott got it done. Then he followed that up with 6 points, 9 rebounds against Virginia, 11 points, 10 rebounds against Clemson. You're not seeing him put up a huge number of actual buckets, but his blocks, his steals, his assists, his rebounds, everything else is pushing him higher and higher, and he's only priced at 5K. Despite this massive production that he's putting on the table, he's dropped from 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", down to 5K. Forward, a cheap forward, one that we can count on, that is starting, playing pretty heavy minutes. I am a big James Scott fan here. Rain Smith is there at 5'2". We've been seeing some pretty good ownership for him. He takes a ton of shots. He knows Kelsey's system. He has the green light, and it's a short rotation, so you can definitely look there. And then guard forward eligibility for Terrence Edwards. He's a great GPP look. I don't think that I can get to him anymore in my main build, but he's definitely got some slate breaking upside. He's been a little bit lackluster lately, which has caused his price to tumble. But he's one of those guys in the large field GPPs you want to have exposure to for sure. Noah Waterman's only 4-1, but if you watch, I don't know how many Louisville games you guys have watched, but when you watch them, he just does not stand out one bit. Just like, I just don't even know what he does. I know he had some big games early in the season, but he's just not a guy I can roster. Value-wise at 3.9, some interest in Abakar Traore. He had that 15-8 game against Virginia. Would need a blowout. Not going to get that against Pitt for him to really see an extended minutes. Fouls, possibly. He's still, getting his game legs and everything after missing, after the first game of the season, he got hurt. He missed like a month and a half. But he's been pretty solid. Double-digit fantasy points in all but one of the games he's been back since his injury. Only priced at 3.9K. Little bit lean of a play. It's one of those ones where you get there and you hope for that 12 to 15 that you see in the logs there. And, by the time there's 5 minutes left, you've got 4 and you're kind of feeling like, why did I take that shot? So I don't think I would go to Traore. He's not necessary because we have so many solid 5, 6, 7K plays, but definitely a GPP look there. On the Pittsburgh side, basically, Jalen Lowe's priced out for me at almost 10K. Definitely has upside. He plays every single minute, has fantastic rates across the board, but he's 9.8K, and his counterpart, Ish Leggett, is only 6.6K. I don't know why he's only 6'6". The algorithm doesn't normally torpedo a guy's price from 9K to 6K in the matter of, I don't know, a month. Unless they're consistently dropping 5, 10, like really just bad performances. That hasn't happened. He got locked up against Duke. He shot 2 of 15 there. He had a bunch of turnovers. He wasn't great. Put up 13.5, but that did not warrant a drop to 6.6K. He put up 21, 6-3 against Stanford, 23, 5-3 against Sam Houston. He missed a game or two in there. 17, 6-3 against Eastern Kentucky, 17, 5-4 against Virginia Tech. I'll stop there. This is not a player that should be priced at 6.6K. I would imagine a pretty hefty amount of ownership on Ish Leggett. Let's just go to Pittsburgh real quick and look at what we have for his number. In 32 minutes, 5X. Would have thought he would be better, but that's still a great number. If this is a close game as I would anticipate it to be, he's probably looking more like 35, 36 minutes, and that's going to push him to slate breaker status. Fantastic look for Ish Leggett. And when you look at the overall rates here, let's pull that up. 24.8% usage, 26.2% shot rate. Has a 3% steal rate. He and Lowe both have really fantastic steal rates, shooting about 30% from long range, so not a great number, but he's drawing 4.5 fouls per 40 as well. Leggett is just a very high volume guy at 6.6K. Everyone else on the team below 6. The forwards, they've been a little bit hit or miss. Zach Austin is there at 5'9", which is a fine price for him going up against Louisville, but it's hard to trust with what he's been doing. Cam Corhan at 5'7" has major upside and has shown that consistently. Offensive rebounding rate of 10.1%, block rate of 3%. Does have a bit of a foul risk there, but he is a very solid look there in that 5K range and pretty much main team viable if you want to go there. Multiple Pittsburgh on a 12-game slate might not be the move, but Leggett with Corrin is definitely a option. And then Guillermo Diaz-Graham, he put up that big 30 against Stanford and had people asking, like, this guy should be a lock. You know, if he's going to get these minutes. Had some early fouls against Duke, only played 12 minutes. He's just not throughout the course of his career, not been a consistent option. We know that about Diaz-Graham. He's one of those players where I try to find out if he's going to be chalk, and if he is, I typically will back off because there's just a lot of upside to fading him, similar to fading Texas running back chalk. He is only 4.6K, up a bit easier matchup against Louisville than on Duke. They're at home, but the minutes that he had at Stanford, 33, compared to what he normally gets, I think was more of an outlier. So I'm kind of projecting him for 20 to 21 minutes, and even at 4.6, we're just not really getting there with him. Perhaps if Leggett was 9K, Corrin was 8K, and all these guys were priced appropriately, we could look at the 4.6 and feel better about it, but we have guys on his team that are blatantly underpriced, and I'm not so sure that he actually is. Brandon Cummings is going to be fantastic next year, but needs Leggett to go. If one of those guys is out, you play Cummings. If they're not, you don't play Cummings. Pretty simple there. And then Damian Dunn, who did return, is dealing with that thumb issue that cost him a month and a half of the season. Played 21 minutes against Duke. Had some foul trouble. Took 8 shots. Rusty, obviously, but he is priced at 4.2K. Definitely some interest there for me and Damian Dunn. I don't want this to turn into a 3-man Pittsburgh stack by any means, but I would expect him to start to close in on possibly getting into the starting lineup. Right now, they're starting, 2 near 7-footers in Diaz-Graham and Corrin. Zach Austin, who is a hitter, kind of a moderate 3-point shooter. Like, they need some floor spacing there with Leggett. I could see Dunn maybe taking Austin's spot in the starting lineup, perhaps. We'll see. But being aware of that, if he does start, he's obviously a great play. Even if he doesn't, I still feel pretty comfortable with him at 4.2. That's a very cheap price. Let's go back to Pittsburgh. Yeah. I mean, if we tentatively put him at 20 minutes, he's easily at 17 fantasy points, assuming in a perfect world, everything goes okay. So there is a pretty deep team here to be had for Pittsburgh, but they are shoring up things and kind of established a pecking order. So even though there's guys like Papa Conte and some of these others who have stepped up, I think overall we're going to see a 8-man rotation pretty consistently with them fully healthy at this point. All right, next game on the slate, Creighton versus Butler. Butler is not good. Creighton's a 2-point favorite on the road, total of 145. Not feeling great about Butler right now. Creighton, I'll get into the comments here in a minute, by the way. I see some more coming in. Creighton's not a team that I'm that comfortable with either without Pop Isaacs. But this is a matchup that has been extremely fantasy friendly. Butler has completely bottomed out. Talks of possibly having a complete regime change. We'll see what happens there. Creighton coming off a close loss, 79-71 against Marquette. This is a game where I think we can take some Creighton pieces into our main lineup and feel pretty good about it overall. The rotation, they keep trying to find some depth out there, but we can count on Stephen Ashworth, Jemiah Neal, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Jason Green, and Jackson McAndrew as the starters, with Mason Miller and Isaac Trout as your top 2 bench pieces. Fedor Zergic, the freshman international player, a little bit too raw, undeveloped, so he's not getting the minutes just yet. Shane Thomas is another raw freshman. And then Frederick King, they just don't play him unless Kalkbrenner is out. Don't know why he didn't transfer this year, but he's good when he does play. And we know Mason Miller, not particularly great. Isaac Trout is going to be the one that I feel pretty interested in terms of not me rostering him, but how owned he's going to be. He played back-to-back games over 20 minutes. He's only 3.3K. He is a bench piece, and when he comes in, he does chuck. He's actually got a fairly decent shot rate, and he takes a bunch of threes. Those threes need to go down for him to pay off, but he's near min price. So for starter value here, or you want just like all the Cooper Flag, Janai Broom, Hunter Dickinson that you can get, somebody like Isaac T is certainly a viable option in that regard. Jason Green as a starter at 3.8 doesn't have a very high amount of upside, but a starter playing almost 30 minutes, definitely viable to a degree in that. But Jackson McAndrew is the one we want to look at the most. McAndrew has a great fantasy point per minute number. He has fantastic usage rate, and he can get really, really hot. The only problem with McAndrew is his defense, and coaching staff readily admits it, is awful, and this is a main reason why he can't get over the hump with his minutes. He plays the first 8 to 10 minutes, gives him what he can offense, then you see him sit out. He'll play one more stretch, and in the second half, when games are close, they just don't use him because he can't defend. He is cheap at 5K. I do think we can get him to 20 minutes, and if he does, he pays this off. And this is a matchup against Butler he should flourish in. But we just won't get a ton of minutes out of him. That's the only problem. Jemiah Neal there at 8K, guard forward eligibility. He's the one I won't have any exposure to, but he'll probably put up a huge number. He has fantastic rates across the board, and he is very balanced in terms of the production that he gives. It's really hard for me to get over the ASU version of him and paying this kind of price for him, but he's definitely benefited from Popak being out, and he's getting more and more opportunities. And again, he's just ratcheting it up when it comes to every other category, and also a threat to score 20 real points. 8K for a player of that caliber is not a bad price whatsoever. It's just a reputation thing for me. Ryan Kalkbrenner is cheap on paper at 9.2K and should do very well against this Butler team that if they try to drive on him, he will send their shit back. He's been rebounding very well this year. You guys remember last year, the Kalkbrenner like 6.5 rebounding props that seemed so low, but he could never beat them. He's beating them this year. Definitely interested to a degree there. Would prefer him at home, but fouls aren't typically a problem for Kalkbrenner, knock on wood. And then Stephen Ashworth, who's priced above him now at 9.5, playing every single minute of the game. You're getting a solid floor if you pay for him. Like, he's probably not dipping under 30, 32 fantasy points. How much more over that will he get you? Cost opportunity there, I think we can do slightly better. So Jackson McAndrew, probably better suited as a GBP look, but I do think he puts up a pretty solid number here in the first half. Butler-wise, it's bad. Jamil Telfort is there at 9K. He only played 28 minutes against Providence, went a long stretch in the second half where he didn't play. I didn't see the exact ailment, but something there that caused a stinger or something that caused him to miss time. I would expect him to get back to playing closer to 38, 39 minutes against this Creighton team. He is a fine play at 9K. I don't know if there's a lot of upside there, but truly the only Butler player that you can really trust at this point. Others getting big minutes, Patrick McCaffrey and Pierre Brooks. Pierre Brooks' price has dropped considerably over the last few weeks. He's down there at 6K now. Had a real nice game against Providence and St. John's, back-to-back over 24. He is playable because of the shot attempts that he takes. Has one of the highest shot rates on the team at 25.5% and shooting 39% from long range. So plenty of volume there for Brooks at 6K. Completely unplayable when he's up in that 7K range, but 6K is definitely a price to consider. And then Andre Screen there at 6'1". They'll need him and his size to counteract Kalkbrenner in that Creighton front court, but I think fouls are probably going to fall upon him. Makes him a little bit of a tougher play. He does project well because he's got good rates, and he was killing it when he was 4K, 5K. But that's one that I'm probably going to be lower on than others. And then Kobe King, as long as he continues to start at 4.9, he is in play. Even as a starter, we're probably getting around 20 to 24 minutes. That is enough to pay this off. But the coaching staff insists upon playing Finley Bizjack just as many minutes. Bizjack had a lot of fans last year for his positive attitude, his hustle mentality, but getting big minutes, he started games, he can't make shots, he turns it over. Like, it's just not happening for him. He's not defending whatsoever. It's just a big minus when he plays, but he's getting huge minutes. You'd think at 4-1, a guy playing possibly 30 minutes should be a really big play for DFS purposes, but it's not. He is really not a good play whatsoever. Even if he pans out, you're really risking a potential 5 at this price, even if he plays 30 minutes. That's really, really tough. All right, let's move on to the Auburn, South Carolina game. But first, let's see what we got here. Good call on Scott Rain Smith for GBP. I might play James Scott in the main. I don't know. Brandon asked me, who do you have winning? Well, it's pretty open-ended. Pretty open-ended. If you're talking about the natty between Notre Dame and Ohio State, I will tell you that I'm riding with the team of destiny, Notre Dame, and I have been for a while. If you're talking about another game, well, please be more specific. But yeah, right now, Notre Dame. I have a feeling that's what you meant. If Waterwind knocks down his first shot, he's good. If not, he's done for the day. Sounds about right. Sounds about right. Kalk season. You like Kalkbrenner? Yeah, it's a good price. He won't even be that rostered either. So, God, the first game of the season, remember, he hung up that just massive game. And it's like, holy shit, he got dropped down damn near 80. He's going to have such a monster season. And he's been good this year, but it's almost like he's been worse without Pop, which is kind of odd. But yeah, he's good. I like him in this matchup for sure. All right, Auburn versus South Carolina. Auburn 16.5-point favorite, total of 147.5. South Carolina, it's going to get worse for South Carolina before it gets better. Just had the 20-point beatdown at home at the hands of Alabama. Probably going to lose by 20 plus here at the hands of Auburn. South Carolina, of course, has our guy Colin Murray-Boyle, CMB. Spendy at 9.7 going up against this defense. I don't think we're going to get there. He's being forced into a lot of turnovers because he's trying to do everything. He's getting so little help from the rest of his team. I see this every time my Huskies play with Great Osabor, so I know exactly what he's going through. It's just causing him to try to force things, and it's really not working out. It was abysmal against Alabama. It's going to be abysmal against Auburn. So we love CMB long term, but this is a bad spot. Jamari Thomas is going to miss this game. So South Carolina already without Miles Studay, who I know some of you out there are big Miles Studay fans for whatever reason, is questionable, but I don't think he's going to play in this one. We'll see. But now they're going to be without one of their lead guards, Jamari Thomas, who's expected to be out for the next 3 weeks at least, has a severe knee sprain that he suffered at the hands of Alabama. So now that he's going to be out and Studay is going to be out, we're probably looking at a combination of Zachary Davis, Jacoby Wright for sure, and then one of Morris Ukas or Cam Scott to kind of step into the starting lineup. I thought maybe one of those guys would step in when they were without Studay, but they did opt to go with Davis. That's fine. We've seen a lot of both Davis and Jacoby Wright, but neither do much. They're pretty much the same player. Neither's a very good scorer. Neither's very consistent. They do defend a little bit. There's a lot of empty minutes out there. Jacoby Wright did score 20 points. Got to the foul line a bunch, but that's not something we can typically count on for him. So one of Cam Scott or Morris Ugas is going to step in here. Morris had a pretty solid game. 23 minutes. He was out there defensively, had a lot of fouls, but I think that he's a guy that will probably step in the starting lineup. He's priced there at 3.9 if Studay is out. If Studay's not out, perhaps maybe Morris ends up playing 20-minute role off the bench that he's had. You'll look through his logs and be disturbed to a degree, but I do think with opportunity, Morris can pan out. So I'm certainly interested in him. Do you have the freshman Arden Conyers, who they've been ramping up minutes for as well? Perhaps he gets more of an opportunity depending on that status of Studay, priced there at 3.4, more of a wing, not a guard. And then Cam Scott all the way down at near min price. Only 8 minutes against Bama. I really expected him to play more. I do think here against Auburn, in a game in which they're probably going to get their doors blown off, Scott could flirt with 20 minutes. Another kind of GP-esque value that you can look out there that's going to have 1% ownership. On the Auburn side, the big decision will be Janai Broome. He's $11K. It's a big price. There's very few players in this world that I'll pay $11K for at the collegiate level. D'Angelo Russell was one way back in the Ohio State days. If you guys didn't play DFS then, it was an amazing show to watch D'Angelo Russell. I know he's not much now, but he was really, really good at Ohio State. Bryce Cotton was another of Providence. He was an absolute just monster. And Zion Williamson was the third. Very few otherwise that I would pay this hefty price tag for. Now, I do love Janai Broome. I have loved him since his OVC, the Ohio Valley Conference days. I was very big on him in that tournament game against West Virginia, and he was a monster then. He has been great for Auburn. He has been absolutely unstoppable and is a very big candidate for the Player of the Year. But this is a very weird spot for him. I think he's puts up 40 no matter what. He's going to be close to 4x here. But there is a big cost opportunity because he's probably not playing, 30 plus minutes. He had 36 against Texas because it was a close game. Texas. It was a close game, and he had a double-double, and he had to play it basically every single minute in the second half, and he was fantastic. In a game in which this could turn into a massive blowout, we're probably looking at mid-20s minutes. He'll still get there to a degree, but I don't see a lot of opportunities beyond the first, half and part of the second half. Once we hit that 12-minute mark in the second half, he's not getting pulled, but I just don't know that he continues to keep that foot on the gas. So if he's at 40 or below, it's a huge fade because I think he'll have quite a bit of ownership still, not 60% because it's a big slate, but 30% for sure, maybe a little more in high dollar single entry. So there's a leverage for fading there. Now, if he pops a 50 even, you're still kind of okay, but if you get into these territory of 55 plus, that's when it's just sayonara, good night, and here's the next slate. What's that next 12 gamer on deck? So I haven't decided one way or another just yet. I really like Cooper Flagg as my favorite pay up, just like the other night. And when you look at the rest, Hunter Dickinson, hell no. Thomas Sorber has been fine, but it's kind of hefty price for him. Low on Pittsburgh, his very own teammates, way cheaper. Why would we do that? Ashworth, he's just okay. Malik Ewan for Florida State's been fine, but 9.3, that's pretty hefty price. So it's really a decision for me, and I think most people, between Broome and Flagg, and there's probably a build out there you can play both, and if both go for 50 plus, it won't matter if you take a player like Cam Scott who gives you 3. With that being said, there are other options on Auburn that are interesting for a tournament standpoint. Todd Pettiford, the freshman, I would expect him to ratchet up to somewhere between 22 to 25 minutes in this one. That puts him in, big time category of putting up 30 plus. And then you have the rotation of guards here: Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Chad Baker, all solid. Chaney Johnson at 6'2", probably the highest upside of the secondary group. He has really stood out this year and been a fantastic option. It's a little spendy for my taste, but he has been putting up some big numbers and paying off these 6'4", 6'8", 7K price tags. So very much in play. And it probably makes more sense, strategically speaking, that if you're going to fade Broome, that you take one of his teammates in hopes that it's a Chad Baker game, for example. And it very well could be. So that might be your best bet. Also interested to a degree in Dylan Cardwell. He's a little bit higher at 5K. But that price did drop for him as he was 5'7". He had a huge game against Monmouth a couple of weeks ago. But this is a game where I think he pulls down a ton of rebounds and has a solid chance to pay off value. So another interesting look there for alt builds. All right, next game we're going to go into is Florida State versus Clemson. The Tigers are 8.5-point favorites, total of 146. This is I'm going to toggle between on my DVP modifier, but tons of guys in this game are projecting extremely well. Makes me a tad bit nervous because Florida State, they did beat Miami by a score of 80-65. And in that game here, give me a minute, 15 players saw minutes for Florida State. Vintage Leonard Hamilton. Now, of course, he put 5 freshmen and walk-ons in at the end, so we can wipe that away. But still, 10 to 11 man rotation, all playing 12 plus minutes. Just typical Leonard Hamilton at his best. There are three players that have extremely high floors and extremely high upside. And that's obviously Jameer Watkins, who's taken a bit of a hit here recently because Malik Ewan is going so bonkers. And then Taylor Bowen, who had a nice start to the season and then kind of fell by the wayside and not really talked about much the last month of the season, is now starting to perform at a high level again as well. He scored 30 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. Nobody's been using him, but he's priced at 6'2", and he's got a matchup against Clemson I think he can take advantage of because he's a versatile player that can rebound, block shots, and hit threes. Not a lot of people can defend a forward that plays like him. Malik Ewan, a banger, does a lot on the interior. He'll be able to kind of neutralize, lock in, Shiflin if he gets there. Maybe he's the one that gets into foul trouble. He's really expensive at 9.3. That's too high for me. Bowen at 6'2" is really looking appealing to me. And then Jameer Watkins' price dipped a little there at 8.9. But you see, his overall production has taken a hit with the maturation of these others. Before, it was just Watkins and sometimes Chandler Jackson, and Watkins would put up his 40, the team would lose, and that would be it. Now the team's winning a few games. They look a little more balanced, and Watkins just not worth this 8.9 price to me, at least right now. You also have the freshman Daquan Davis there at 5'7", had a really nice performance against Miami, 10 assists, hit a bunch of threes against Syracuse the game before that. He is really starting to usurp Boston Holt and others for more minutes, and we're seeing Davis start to push towards that 30-minute mark. Like Daquan Davis a lot. He's a little bit spendy at 5'7", but if you're going with a more balanced approach to the slate, he's definitely a guy who's in play. Taylor Bowen is definitely a guy who's in play. Those are my 2 favorite FSU players for this slate, in fact, more so than Watkins and Ewan. And then rounds it out with guys like Chandler Jackson, who are cheap at 4.6, a value if you need him. His minutes fluctuate, though, and at this point, there's not a lot of upside. Justin Thomas, who played 26 minutes against Miami, he scored 6 points, had 3 steals, put up 22 fantasy at 4.5. He's definitely solid. And then Jerry Dang needs foul trouble to really be effective, but he is a very solid defender. He's a player that they like and want to play more of. He's not impacting the DFS and the box score just yet, but at 4.3, he is somewhat interesting and has shown an ability to pay this price off with minutes in the past. On the Clemson side, we saw, I'm going to start at the bottom here. Dylan Hunter played only 9 minutes, was ineffective against Louisville, had 3 fouls. He's been a bit of a fouler lately. And because of that, it gave Jake Heidbreder more of an opportunity. And the former Air Force transfer did so well with that opportunity that he played 28 minutes, and it cost Hunter to play only 9. Heidbreder, not much for secondary stats, but he is a scorer. He was at Air Force, and he really did well against Louisville despite losing that game. 2 of 5 from downtown, 4 of 10 overall, 10 real points, 12.5 fantasy points. He's 4.2K. He did, prior to that, play over 20 minutes in 2 of his previous 4. I'm a little bit nervous about him because I did have interest after the Wake Forest game in which he played 22 minutes and had 15 real. Then he proceeded to play 16 and 6 minutes in back-to-back games. So obviously some risk here to a degree, but Heidbreder is just too good. It doesn't even make sense for him to have transferred to Clemson if they weren't going to use him, because let's pull this up real quick. It's been a couple of years. You probably don't even remember, and I'm sure you don't follow Air Force. Who would, right? No disrespect to the service academy, but I don't know how many people follow their basketball program. During his time at Air Force, freshman season, was pretty solid, shot 38% from long range, but it was his sophomore year before he transferred, 26% shot rate, played the 8th most minutes in the Mountain West, 39% three-point shooter, drew over 3.5 fouls per 40, had an assist rate about 15%, not great, not awful, and had one of the best true shooting and effective field goal percentages in the Mountain West. This was a player who was regularly and routinely scoring 18-plus real points. So he's not a scrub. He's definitely not a scrub. Just needs opportunity. They have Jaden Zachary and Chase Hunter in front of him, and to a degree it's been Dylan Hunter in front of him as well. But now it looks like he might start to push Dylan Hunter and he's already pushed past some of these other younger guards on the roster, guys like Del Jones, and Chris Reeves. Miles Foster can't even get minutes, who was really good in lower level conferences. So Heidbetter is someone I'm keeping my eye on. This is one of those maybe like wait and see, throw into an alt build, don't quite put him into your main lineup. This is the type of plays I love to be early on, and I'm almost willing to take a brick just to try and be early on. But he is definitely going to be taking more minutes here going forward. And they are running a lineup even without Chauncey Wiggins that Heidbetter was in a smaller lineup. Wiggins has his moments. He's shown flashes, but there's a lot of complaints from fans and beat writers alike that he's taking bad shots. He's only 4'4", so he's somewhat interesting, but Heidbetter definitely looms there. If we got to this game and he was a starter, I would be falling all over myself to play him. Victor Locken is cheap at 6K. His rates make him a solid computer play, if you will. He projects quite well, but minutes are kind of erratic. I'm not chomping at the bit to play him. Certainly interesting against FSU, but I don't love it. Jaden Zachary at 6'1", playing all the minutes he can handle. At BC, he was fantastic in a regular main team play. He hasn't been the same for Clemson, but he has scored 28-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. So definitely stepping his game up. Ian Schifflin at 7'8". We know what kind of upside he's had. He was killing the non-con. Conference play has been a mixed bag, but definitely solid. Certainly should be priced higher than 7'8". He just came off a game in which he was almost 9K. So we're getting a huge discount for him, and I expect him to be relatively popular because of it. And then at 8.2K, the highest priced player on the team is Chase Hunter. I would not pay that price for him. He's a little risky there. He does have a lower floor than you'd like at 8.2, but he's been playing very good nonetheless. All right, we're halfway through the slate here. Let's keep it going. Next game on the slate, Kansas versus Cincinnati. Kansas a 1-point favorite. I got to say, I got to lead with, man, Cincinnati are frauds. Fraudulent. 10-4, solid record. Wes Miller had this team in the top 25 of the net after the first month of the season. And it's because they juked their schedule a bit. And you can do this as of now. We don't really know the full, flavors of the net rankings and how they're made. Very vague with what we know there. But one metric we've been told is margin of victory. So Wes Miller and Cincinnati went into their non-con and just beat the hell out of teams like Nichols, Morehead State, Georgia Tech, which is an ACC team, so I guess that's great. But Alabama State, Howard, just absolutely doors blown off. They lost the road game to at the time, a very bad Villanova. Villanova looks better now, but in early December, think about how bad that Villanova team looked. A nice win over Xavier, although they've bottomed out. A nice win over Dayton. They've started to bottom out. And then a blowout win against Grambling State. Okay, that's fine. That's great. What are you, 10-1 at that point? They've proceeded to lose on the road by 3 to a very mediocre Kansas State team. They've lost at home to an Arizona team that's starting to wake up. And then they got absolutely decimated by a Baylor team that I thought was a legit Final Four contender. I'm not so sure of that now. They've been good, not great, but they absolutely pounded Cincinnati into the ground at home. Now Cincinnati has a tough spot here. They're at home against Kansas, but it's Kansas. Kansas hasn't looked particularly great either, although they're starting to pick it up a little bit. And I got to say, Cincinnati and Wes Miller, they've got to start winning some games here, and they've got to start putting something on the table. They have Colorado and Arizona State next. Those are 2 very winnable games, but then they have a stretch with Texas Tech and BYU before facing bottom feeders like Utah and West Virginia. But they have a really brutal TCU, Baylor, Houston stretch towards the end of the season. They got to start getting some conference wins on the table here. And what better way to do that than against Kansas right here, right now? Cincinnati guys, will start with them. All are priced pretty nice. Definitely have interest. Dan Skilling's clearly the best player on the team right now, priced at 6'3". Very advantageous. He doesn't necessarily have the highest upside, though, but his floor is rock solid. You roster Dan Skillings, you're not getting less than 26, 28 fantasy points. And his price of 7.3, 7.6 at the time wasn't getting it done. But now that he's down at 6.3, you can get a near 30 and feel pretty damn good about it. Clearly the top overall option on this Cincinnati team. They get healthy, they add players, but Skillings stays at the top. 28.1% shot rate, shooting 37% from long range, 26% usage rate, does it all. Like to see him get a little more from his peripherals, but he is scoring a ton of points right now. Dylan Mitchell at 5'8", that's a cheap price for him. Major like just dumpster game against Baylor. You'd think, oh, he put up 4.5 against Baylor on the road. He probably got into foul trouble, didn't get many minutes. No, he played 31 minutes. It's actually the highest amount of minutes he's played in like 2 months, but he did nothing. He only shot twice, which means he was on the floor basically standing around and pissing himself, because how do you possibly play 31 minutes as Dylan Mitchell, a player who has shown us he can be quite aggressive and get after it like he did against Kansas State, took 12 shots, had 11 rebounds, 15 points, like that Dylan Mitchell, 31 minutes, 2 shots, 4 turnovers. It's about as bad as you'll get. That's not a trillion performance, but that's pretty damn bad. Worry, he's at home at least, but going up against Hunter Dickinson, there's surely going to be some prima donna whining from Hunter. There's probably going to be some bad foul calls. Like Mitchell's price is fantastic at 5'8", but there's no way I feel comfortable enough to land him into my main build, because I just know there's going to be foul issues here when Hunter Dickinson's involved, or technicals. Jizzle James at 5'5", his offense has not come through yet this year. He has the opposite problem, Dan Skillings. His peripherals are solid, which makes him a great play overall at 5'5", but his scoring ability has taken a big hit. He's been inefficient here lately, but he is taking volume, 22 shots total in the past 2 games. Definitely interested there, but Cincinnati has hurt me a bunch of times. They continue to project well. They're going to project well again because of these cheap prices and how well they did in the non-con, but they're going to start balancing out here. If they keep bricking these conference games, we'll have enough, game logs there to kind of stop them from projecting so highly. But these prices are really good. Aziz Bandiago at 5'5", same deal here. Really strong price for a player that's going to get close to 30 minutes, barring any foul trouble there with the Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, Flory Badunga front court. One thing we have seen out of the non-con is Seamus Lukosius really fall back down to earth. He was the best player on the Bearcats for the first month this season, and it was kind of unbelievable for a time. His price even got up to 8.4. Seems like a distant memory at this point as he's priced at 5.2, but this is who Seamus is. A quality secondary role player who can shoot a 3 a little bit and can make an extra pass, but he is not a takeover, put up, 20 real points per game type of guy. He can do that against Pine Bluff, but he's not doing that in conference, especially not against Kansas. So he's at 5.2, but that's pretty much where I think he's going to live, between 5 and 6K. So he's not the great value that he probably looks like. And then lastly, you have Day Thomas coming off the bench, getting about 20 to 22 minutes at 4.7K. This is a game I think they'll need him steadily a little bit more. He played that 21 against Arizona, took 12 shots there. It's pretty solid against them. Does a lot of volume. He definitely gets those shots, but he does contribute in other categories as well. So definitely like Day Thomas to a degree. On the Kansas side, I'm not rostering Hunter Dick. I'm on record. I'm not rostering Hunter Dickinson at 10K. If he puts up 50 tomorrow, then whatever. I just don't care. I'm so tired of Hunter Dickinson at this point. I'm so ready for him to go join the EL or China or whatever he's going to do. Maybe a career, go pro in something other than sports. I don't know. He is just so annoying from a watching game standpoint, but also just rostering it. Like, can you even remember a time when you've rostered Hunter Dickinson and he didn't just like give you 5 at halftime? You're like, oh, this is great. I absolutely love the fact that I paid 10K for Hunter Dickinson to do that. Now, he'll usually get you closer to 35 on a bad game, and when he's really all systems go, putting up 50, right? But man, you never know, because he's so emotional. And when I played, I was a pretty emotional guy too. I think all of us 90s kids were. But damn, if he doesn't talking about a couple of shots or having things go your way early, complete shutdown from Hunter Dickinson. Like, legitimately, if he doesn't have like 10 points in the first 5 minutes, he's just shutting down. So I'm playing Flag, I'm playing Broom, I'm playing all these other pay-ups before him. On the road against Cincinnati, that just seems like, as much as I'm down on Cincinnati right now, that seems like a horrible spot to pay 10K for Hunter Dickinson. 8-4 is a little too high on Zeke Mayo as well. They finally unleashed Zeke. He's been putting up great numbers, but I just don't feel like paying 8-4 for him. KJ Adams at 5'8". The player I want to use is Flory Badunga, but 14 minutes against ASU, so inexcusable. I know he fouled out there, but he was barely playing before that. Shot blocker extraordinaire, great rebounder. He's going to be the next great like Kansas front court player if he doesn't transfer out, but give him some minutes, Bill. Give him some minutes. Shaquille Moore did start. He's 4K, played 21 minutes against ASU. If he starts again, I assume he will. Definitely a value piece. Probably somewhere near the top for me in terms of value, just because he's a known quantity name. He's hurt us over the years from a myriad of programs. Don't get me wrong there, but if he's getting starter minutes, even in the 20s at 4K, definitely don't mind him. We've seen that starter spot go from AJ Storr to David Coit to all these different options. Kansas coming into the season had this amazing depth finally, and somehow the coaching staff has managed to absolutely destroy the confidence of AJ Storr, who looked like a future NBA player only a year ago. Rylan Griffin not developing at all, and then David Coit, he's finding out. He probably found Joseph Yesufu's diary in the Kansas locker room, and now he's living that Joseph Yesufu story from last year. So congratulations. So yeah, Shaquille Moore at 4K, that's probably my favorite Kansas play, as strange as that sounds, but he's got to start. And even if he starts, I would expect him to get rugged and AJ Storr to go from playing 3 minutes last game to suddenly playing 30. That's a real thing that will probably happen. All right, next game on the slate here, we have I got a ton of prize picks, actually. Nice Wolverine picture. I do have some. Once we finish the slate here, I'll go right into prize picks. BYU's 1.5 point favorite versus TCU, total of 140.5. BYU started out hot with Kevin Young at the helm here. Had a pretty tough schedule here recently. Road game against Houston, predictably they got destroyed, and then a close home loss to Texas Tech. They did a great job neutralizing JT Toppin. KenPom does have this one 71-70 in favor of TCU, but I do like BYU to win here, even though it's on the road. Igor Demon is back and healthy now, and that's going to cause problems for a TCU team that just doesn't scare anybody. Everybody on BYU is relatively cheap. Igor is there at 6'2". The Houston game, you can just wipe that out. It was tough. I mean, you put up almost 18 to 20 against Houston, which is honestly very impressive considering BYU's composition. But against a tough Texas Tech team, 12-4-6, that's the kind of performances I expect from him, even as a freshman. And when we saw him start the season against lesser competition, like Central Arkansas, like Idaho, Queens, he was putting up massive numbers. So this guy can definitely play. 6'2" for me is underpriced. Definitely interested. As far as anyone else, Richie Saunders has a 50 in his game log, but he's typically not going to do that. So I'm not very interested there. You have other pieces that start like Dallin Hall at 4'6", playing roughly 30 minutes. So that's a value piece. He doesn't have a high upside or ceiling, but 30 minutes at 4'6", it's worth mentioning. And then the two upside plays, Keba Kaida, who has great overall rates, and Fousseyni Traore, whose fantasy point per minute number up until conference play and over the years has been elite. Had a pretty solid 14-5 performance against Texas Tech there at 5'1". He comes off the bench, but anytime he's priced in this low 5K range, he's a really strong tournament play, capable of winning you a tournament, believe it or not. As far as Keba Kaida goes, he does start, but he splits directly with Traore, and he's in the same exact boat. He can break a slate. Majority of the time, he's going to give you 15 to 20. TCU side, Frankie Collins out. We know that forever. Prices have dumped on many of these players. Ernest Uday is no longer priced at a ridiculous 8Ks. They're at 6.6. BYU has the bodies and the size to throw at him. I do like him in this spot. Wouldn't trust him in a main or high stakes lineup, but at 6.6 deserves consideration. Has 30+ fantasy point upside overall. Uday has really kind of blossomed in this system. Doesn't have particularly great rates, but this is the second year with TCU since transferring from Kansas. Everybody at Kansas gets ran out one way or another, but he has elite rebounding numbers, almost 40% combined, block rate of 6.5%, steal rate of 3.5%, and it's those categories that jack up his fantasy totals quick. And in conference play, he's actually been scoring at a decent level as well. With the injuries that they've had, various Brendan Wenzel and Noah Reynolds and all these guys who have been in and out, they're finally looking to be healthy without Frankie Collins. There's a lot of guys who are very similar, though. Noah Reynolds, Traz White, Wenzel, all priced in a similar range. None of them have very much upside. Bashan Aled is the most interesting and probably the best basketball player on the team overall. When you watch TCU games, you'll find yourself looking at Aled thinking, this kid's pretty good. But none of them really do much in the box score that we need them to from a DFS perspective. Wenzel at 4.8, probably your best bet, but his minutes haven't been ramped up just yet since returning from his about a month hiatus. So a little bit of rust there. But if he starts ramping that minutes up and gets over 25 at 4.8, he can definitely pay that off. But he has not looked well. But we have to keep in consideration they played Houston and Kansas State. Not great matchups for anyone. All right, moving on to the next one. We have Iowa State versus Texas Tech. This is a total of 147. Texas Tech is 1.5-point favorites. Expect a defensive struggle for most of this game. Doesn't bring a warm and fuzzy feeling to my heart whatsoever. As usual, most of my interest for Iowa State is in Keyshawn Gilbert, who has asserted himself as the alpha on this team and is a fair 7.3K. Dumped because of matchup. This is a kid that was almost 9K just a couple of weeks ago. So we're getting a nice price drop. Curtis Jones is expensive, his running mate coming off the bench, but Curtis Jones has taken on that secondary and sometimes alpha scoring role. Against Utah, he had 23, 5, and 6, easily the best game of his career. He has been phenomenal on this season, and he has really warranted this price increase of 7.9. Nobody rosters him. Projections never say he's going to do good, but it's one of those players that you just know is going to continue to chuck, and it's going to give you consistent points, if nothing else. We'll check out his point prop later. Tamin Lipsey is there at 6'1", but he is mainly just a defender. At this stage, we know he plays defense very well. Offense can be spotty. He did score 20 actual points against the Utah Utes, and he did it with 14 free throw attempts. Don't expect him to do that once again here, especially against Texas Tech, where a lot of his energy is going to be exerted trying to guard the wing options on the team. Milan Momcleavage is there at 5K. 3-point shooter, 3-point specialist, and then Deshaun Jackson at 4.8. Very cheap, significantly cheaper than his front court running mate Josh Jefferson at 9.1. Not too fond of either of them in this matchup. It's Gilbert or Jones, and even then their secondary plays at best. Texas Tech, Darian Williams is too expensive for this matchup at 9.6. The Cyclones have been really good defensively. I don't like to target against them very often. Not that they can't give up fantasy points, and Williams has been astounding here the last month of the season, but I just don't get in the habit of paying almost 10K for guys against them. Price drop here for JT Toppin, second in a row. He was 10-2 before he got into massive foul trouble against Utah. He missed a couple of games you may remember, and in the BYU game, he got into early foul trouble again, played only 14 minutes against Utah because 2 fouls in like 3 minutes. Got the third one early in the second half and then sat for the majority of the game playing 14 minutes because they didn't need him in a blowout win over Utah. They did need him in a close win against BYU, but he got into foul trouble again, and he only played 18 minutes. So price drops from 10-2 to 8-8 to now 7-2. And he can't keep getting away with this. Cue the meme. Because I really want to use him at 7-2, but I know that it's the wrong call. I'm pot committed at this point, so I'll just throw him into an alt lineup somewhere. that like qualifier teams, if you're playing the 250, like JT Toppin is the perfect qualifier play because nobody's going to roster him, but you know he has legitimate 50 upside. The fouling issue that started to fall upon him, which was not a big problem pre-injury, is a bit concerning, but that price of 7.2 is very, very advantageous. They are giving a bunch more minutes to Federico, who was really good in the absence of JT Toppin. I thought he would fall off a cliff here with him back, and that just hasn't happened. He still maintains in that 5.1K. He's somewhat interesting. Elijah Hawkins at 6'8". I think he's going to get cuffed by the Iowa State perimeter. He had a big game against BYU, but that is not something we can count on. And then you do have value pieces in the rest of the rotation. And Kevin Overton at 4'6", playing mid-20s minutes. And then the freshman Christian Anderson, 4'9", also playing about 20 to 25 minutes off the bench. All right, UConn versus Georgetown. We're getting into like the good games here for DFS, the favorable stacks. UConn a 5-point favorite against Georgetown, total of 143. Pump the brakes here with this UConn -5. Georgetown under Ed Cooley, they're doing things this year. They're 12-3. A questionable loss to Notre Dame early in the season. If they played them today, I think they'd win. Lost to West Virginia, and then a pretty close loss to Marquette, a very good Marquette team. Ken Pom has this one 75-73 in favor of UConn. I think Georgetown can win this game. Definitely going to cover. Georgetown +5 is one of my top 3 bets of the day. I'm not that confident in Georgetown on a game-to-game basis, but I am here against UConn without Liam McNeely. UConn's looked spotty here without Liam, especially with consistent shooting. With that being said, I don't have a ton of interest in the overall plays here for Georgetown. We'll see if Jaden Epps plays. He played the 4 minutes there against Xavier, and then did not play their last game there. The severity of injury they're being coy about, but it seems like it's obviously very, very bad. So Caleb Williams would continue to start, but he played 27 minutes against Marquette, had one of his worst games as a starter. And what we saw was Curtis Williams come off the bench and play 26 minutes, which was a season high for him. And he had a pretty quality 10.3 rebound, 1 steal stat line at 3.7K. I don't think Caleb gives up his starting spot unless Jaden Epps is actually back, but Curtis at 3.7 just got put into our player pool here because I think those minutes could be here to stay for him, at least right now. Looking at it, Georgetown is running a very short rotation, a hallmark for Ed Cooley teams during the mid-2010s at Providence. He's running a 7-man rotation here without Epps. Drew McKenna is ailing. Right now, we're looking at Micah Peavy, Malik Mack, Thomas Sorber, Drew Fielder, Caleb Williams, and then Curtis Williams and Jordan Burks off the bench. Jordan Burks playing about 10 minutes, leaves a ton for the starters and for Curtis Williams. Mack is in play at 7-1, probably your best of the top 3 with Epps possibly out. Peavy's cheap at 8-1, and then Sorber at 9-9. That's another exorbitant price there at almost 10K for him. He was great against Marquette. That Marquette front court defense has been way better this season than I thought it would be, but he was just wrecking them. 5 blocks, 13 rebounds. Really nice game for him. Third time he's eclipsed 40 fantasy points in the last 4. But UConn has Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed. That will not be easy for Sorber, especially on the glass. We've gotten some really great Micah Peavy games here at low rostership. This is the cheapest he's been in about a month. He puts up a ton of secondary stats, rebounds, stocks, all of that good stuff. Guard forward eligibility, definitely in play at 8-1. On the UConn side, no Liam McNeely again. Hassan Diarra is just too expensive. Mentioned this last slate. He's 8K, still technically in play. He had a bit of a rough first half, but still churned out 30 against Villanova. Now he's up to 8-7. Diarra, again, has been great, but that is a very high price for him. Alex Caravan at 8-3. He just operates so much better as a secondary player than the alpha. We're seeing him take a ton of shots. His blocks naturally regressed. He couldn't keep blocking 8 shots a game. It just wasn't going to happen. The 8-3 price, definitely intriguing. I still think he pushes his way towards 30, but opportunity cost wise, I just think we can get 30 from a lot of guys in the 6K range instead. Solo Ball at 6'5" is taking a ton of shots without Liam McNeely. Anytime they have a player out, Solo just becomes this volume guy. So he's certainly in play at 6'5", probably my preferred option on UConn. Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed both splitting time, 6'5" or 6'4" for Reed, 5'3" for Samson Johnson. Not a lot of interest there for me. Aiden Mahaney didn't trick us because we didn't play him, but after the 20 minutes against Providence, no, he played 14 against Villanova. He was awful. Back to the Aiden Mahaney we've seen most of the season. The first game without Liam, we saw Jaden Ross start. It was awful. He had 0. Came off the bench, hit a 3 early, had a couple of rebounds, was better in 11 minutes, but still not a playable option just yet. They did start my man Jalen Stewart, who's priced there at 4.6. He played 31 minutes against Nova. He was great, 14 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 blocks. A lot of those points came early. He had 10 in the first half because he knocked down a couple of triples. Predictably, in the second half, didn't do as much, but I would expect him to continue to start here going forward. At 4.6, that definitely makes him an option. And then we did see finally Ahmad Noel, who's been dealing with the shoulder injury for about 2 months now. Played 6 minutes off the bench against Villanova. He actually looked pretty decent in those 6 minutes, but just worth noting that he's back. All right, next game here, Syracuse versus Boston College. Two teams that nobody outside of their own program's fans give a damn about, but we do also, especially on a slate like this, because this is a very stackable game. BC, a 1-point favorite, total of 147. We want all the Syracuse BC we can handle. Well, I stacked Syracuse Georgia Tech, 4 men deep. We joked, watch it be a low-scoring game, 60-50. Well, it did end up being a low-scoring game, 62-55, but luckily the plays we were on mostly did well. The J.J. Starlings of the world, the Jair Davis, Javian McCollum ended up okay. Like, it ended up fine. This is another game that I think is going to have a ton. This one will end up better. This will be in the 80s. Both of these teams are going to absolutely nuke. First order of business will be to track news on Donovan Freeman, who's dealing with the lower leg issue. It caused him to miss Tuesday's game. That's almost 30 minutes available with him out. Let's pull up Syracuse box, because I would suspect we see the same starting lineup that we did if he doesn't go, which was J.J. Starling, Eddie Lampkin, Jair Davis, who we really anticipated starting, and he did, Lucas Taylor, and Elijah Moore. Off the bench, we saw Jaquan Carlos, which is a bit of a surprise. They moved him to the bench. He played barely at all. Chris Bell, Petar Mastrovic, who has a bright future, and Kyle Cuffey, who's gone between 25 minutes, 3 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 minutes. So we want to keep our exposure to this team to the starters for sure. Freshman Elijah Moore has shown a ton of upside, but his minutes are the first to get pulled. So even if he starts, not much interest there. Lucas Taylor, definitely some interest, but if Freeman is out, it's really 3 players on this team for us to look at. J.J. Starling, Eddie Lampkin, and Jair Davis. Starling was a very easy play on the last slate at 5.4, put up a huge number. Now he's priced at 6.4, still too cheap for him and what he can do, but it's more in line. He's not a must play by any means, but definitely a solid look, and I would be shocked if he didn't put up another 30 here. Eddie Lampkin at 5.6, a very strong price. If no Freeman, there's very little upside to fading him. And this does turn into a scenario in which I think we need 2 Syracuse players. And then you also have Jair Davis, who goes from 4.2 to 4.9, but still very much in play. Played 32 minutes against Georgia Tech. He's more fadeable at nearly 5K, but without Freeman, he's also going to get a ton of minutes. Scoring isn't going to be much of his forte, so he's going to have to get rebounds and some other stuff, but he's still cheap enough at 5K. He's in the circle here for us to play. But Lampkin and Starling are cheap enough to where I can plug in both of those and move on with my very merry way. If Freeman plays, I actually prefer him over Lampkin for what it's worth. On the Boston College side, these guys are all cheap as well. It starts with Donald Hand at 6.3, who's come down a little bit because he's had 2 straight games under 20 fantasy points, but he's really strong option at that price. 24% shot rate, 23% usage rate, 23.1% defensive rebounding rate. Just kind of turned into the alpha here for this team and can put up a big number, shoots a bunch of threes, contributes. The rebounding rate is what's really surprising because he's all of 6'4" out there, but very aggressive. Chad Venning at 5'9", the highest usage and shot rate on the team at 25% each. Still prefer Donald Hand, but Venning in this matchup against Syracuse, especially if they don't have Freeman, way more rebounding opportunities for him. So he's absolutely in play. And then the third look here on BC is Elijah Strong at 5'2". Strong's been in and out of the lineup, but he has been starting here lately. He's starting 5 that we can expect for this team. Hand, Venning, Strong to top 3, Josh Beadle and Dion Brown, and then Fred Payne, Roger McFarland, and Chaz Kelly off the bench. Now, Strong is a very nice look at 5'2". There is some concerns here for this individual matchup against the Syracuse front court. I'm more comfortable with him if Freeman is out. If Freeman plays, that's just another body clogging things up. And it makes me concerned because of Strong's foul rate that sometimes rears its ugly head up as he's 4.1 fouls called per 40. Has an elite offensive rebounding rate, shot rate over 23%, usage rate over 23%. He's a much stronger play than I think people realize, and I think he might go overlooked. So that's why I have that interest in him and those great rates, but I'm definitely going to be cautious here and be tracking that news. Unfortunately, in that regard, it's one of the last games on the slate, so there won't be a lot of pivots necessarily, but there is still the Missouri game, and in this actual BC game, we can make some movements around. And if you're like me and you have 3 from it at least, you can make multiple swaps if you have to. So if I'm committed to play Strong at that point, I'll probably just keep him in regardless, but just something to be aware about. All right, next game and last game on the slate, Vanderbilt versus Missouri. Missouri 3-point favorites, total of 156.5. I believe that is the highest total on the slate. Let's get some 160s in here, can we? Start with the Missouri side. Neither of these teams are particularly exciting overall, but they do offer us some fantasy viability. And Missouri had a very solid surgical-like win over LSU recently, 83-67. Tamar Bates had 20 real points there. The big story of the season so far has been Anthony Robinson, who is a defensive specialist last year, but he has really soared to a new height this year and has turned himself into a scorer and well-rounded player. You saw that against LSU, 16-4-4. The illness that came through, I believe he had the norovirus. It's ripping through multiple locker rooms. It definitely cost him some games there, but you can see with a healthy Anthony Robinson, he has 30-plus fantasy point upside here at 6'1". Tamar Bates, more expensive at 6'4", but not expensive enough, coming off of a 40. He takes a ton of shots, but he's more efficient than most people with them, gets himself the foul line, and he's rebounding at a higher clip this year. So definitely on board with Tamar Bates. Love my man Mark Mitchell at 6'3". He's been less consistent than the other guys, but his upside is there, especially in a matchup like this. We'll have very minimal rostership, so I'm on board there. And then you have Tony Perkins at 5'2", who played way less minutes at LSU, 18 there. I thought he might play more. This is a decent buy low opportunity for him. High usage, high shot rate. Trent Pierce, who gives you guard forward eligibility and shows that when he's on the floor, he will chuck. And then you have Caleb Grill, who continues to be chalk. 3'6", 3'7". Now he's 4'4". People are going to keep rostering Caleb Grill. He hasn't played 20 minutes yet. We know he'll shoot. He's never met a 3 he won't take. Man, Caleb Grill at 4'4" is just so bad. So bad. I'm not going to jump on him, but continuing to see him at 30% ownership has been a journey. And then you have Marcus Warwick, who is 4'3", great during his time in the Horizon League. Played 21 minutes against LSU. We can keep him in that 20-minute range. He's definitely got viability here at the 4'3". Secondary scorer on the team, but when they need a bucket, they can look to him. He was brought in for that purpose. And you saw the game against Auburn. When they kept it close for a while, he scored 19 against them, 5 of 8 shooting. LSU scored 12 on 4 of 10 shooting. So they're starting to get more from Warwick in the SEC games here, which is what they really needed. Vanderbilt, Jason Edwards is probable, so he doesn't start, but he comes off the bench, typically plays 20-plus minutes. So expecting Edwards to be there. He's just okay. He hasn't been playing a huge role. A.J. Hoggard at 6'3" was a very nice option early in the season at a low price. kind of hit a lull there, but in conference play, he stepped it up. Very much in play, lead guard for them. He's got the ball in his hands often. Devin McLaughlin started the season off as just an absolute god, but he's a non-con hero, putting up 50s. Not going to do that in SEC play. Still want to see his price drop. It has been steadily dropping, but it needs to come down even further. Jalen Carey has been the best fantasy option on this team over the last month of the season, but that's caused his price to come up to 5.6. Still playable, but a little bit less appealing there in that price range, but is a forward. Definitely interesting. And then Grant Huffman at 4.5, 20 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 as the kind of lower usage starter. But in SEC play, he has been contributing more. He's interesting at 4.5K. All right, so that is the slate here. What do we want to do for a core? We definitely want Duke guys. We want some Louisville guys, maybe some Creighton. I think starts off for me with Tyrese Proctor as core play number 1. Just gives me a safe floor to start out with at 5.5. And I don't know that he will get that much rostership. I think people will go to Flag. I think Knipple will see some love, maybe some Zion James. I just don't know that Proctor will be the one that people go to. So that's core play number 1. Core play number 2. I'm going for it. I'm going for it, Tub. He said like a GBP play, which makes sense, but man, James Scott, going to give him the posh play designation as well at 5K. Forward slot against Pittsburgh. I think he is going to pay off handsomely for us. Foul trouble, knock on wood, not really a problem with him. Man, he has so much untapped potential still, and he's starting to really turn it on. So James Scott, core play number 2, and posh play of the big Saturday main slate. That is a very important distinction. We don't hand it out lightly, but that is where we're going. And then core play number 3, we're going JJ Starling for Syracuse. All relatively cheap guys, and you can make a nice balanced lineup here. But Cooper Flag and Janai Broom, if you can afford one of them, if you can afford both of them, obviously do it. They're both going to have great games, and they're going to have floors of 40. The Broom fade makes a lot of sense, though, strategically speaking. All right, we're not going to go over the afternoon and night slates here. There's not enough time, although we're flying. We'll have projections for all 3. So if you're a member of the FTN Discord and the site, you will get access to all of those and the note sheet that accompanies it. Sunday starts the full slate breakdowns in article form. We'll be doing those on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. So those days we'll have 4 articles a week. We'll still have projections every single day and notes as well, and then 3 shows a week until we get into late February. All right, prize picks. We had somebody ask about prize picks. Good question. I don't even know. It's just there for looks at this point. I don't even know. It's 2020. I had a whole bunch of those. I had a whole bunch like during the pandemic, and I just collected. But then got rid of a bunch of them. So I don't even know. I don't even think I'll ever open it, to be honest with you. All right, let's get into some prize picks here. I always wonder if people notice my background stuff. I mess with it. I don't mess with it every show I used to, but I add stuff, take stuff away. So it makes me happy that you noticed it. All right, prize picks play. So number 1, I got a few here. I'm feeling pretty good. Hit a nice prize picks parlay earlier today with Trey Henderson, that 75-yard touchdown catch. That was awesome. All right, Corey McKeithen for LaSalle, over 15.5 points versus the Bonnie, St. Bonaventures. He has scored over that in 2 straight. He had a little bit of a down run there for a time, but McKeithen transferring into LaSalle, he is from Ryder. He has been an absolute stud for them throughout the season. 24 in their last game against Loyola, 19 against Dayton. As I said, he had a couple of down games before that, but he has hit this mark consistently. The Bonnies are definitely good, but over 15.5 is an easy number for him to hit. Also like Jackson McAndrew, over 9 points versus Butler. We talked about it. He has to do it in the first half, I think, because of his porous defense. But I could see him hitting back-to-back threes early on. and then sometime before halftime getting that, or in the second half early, hitting another 3. So 9+ points there for Jackson McAndrew. Will McClendon over 14.5 points plus assists. This is actually my favorite one of the day. McClendon is a UCLA transfer. Very little use player for them. Couldn't defend. Didn't do much of anything, honestly. 14.5 assists plus points is such a great number. 20 against Utah State, 19 against UNLV, 16 against Colorado State, just 12 against Boise State. But he's hit this number in 3 straight games, and he is facing off or I expect him to continue to hit this off in 4 straight games. He's actually been a pretty decent scorer, but his assist rate has gone up as well. They're playing Air Force in a game that they're projected to win 69-67. Air Force bottom 300 in defense, bottom 300 in offense. They're 3-12. They have some great individual players on their team like Ethan Taylor, but overall this team can't defend a lick. They can't do anything. They're a slow-paced team, and Will McClendon should be able to hit over that number. So that's my top prize picks play for sure. Khalif Battle over 19.5 PRA. Gonzaga has Ajayi, who might be out. He is dealing with some ailments. He missed their last game. They're facing off against a very porous Washington State team that is beaten down and has a ton of injuries. So I'd love this number over 19.5 PRA for Battle. He should be able to eclipse that. He might even score 20 real points, to be honest. Matthew Cleveland over 20.5 PRA. We didn't get to talk about this game because it's on one of the secondary slates. I think it's on the afternoon, right? Yeah, on the afternoon slate, that 12 gamer. Nigel Pack is going to be out indefinitely. I think he's done. I think Nigel Pack is done playing collegiate basketball. I do not expect to see him back. Matthew Cleveland going to play a ton of minutes without him. Had 16 real points, 5 rebounds. The 20.5 PRA is very advantageous, I believe, here. Matthew Cleveland, a matchup against Wake Forest. Prior to the game against FSU, which was technically a down game for him, he hit this number 30+ in 4 straight games. So Matthew Cleveland over 20.5 PRA. And then one more for the road, Parsa Fala for Oregon State. Oregon State's going to be playing Pacific. One nice thing about Oregon State not having a true conference, they're getting to play all these different teams. I guess WCC this year, but they're playing a lot of the bottom feeders as well. And Pacific is a team that, while winning in overtime on a late shot against Washington State, can't defend at all, plays at an ideal pace for DFS purposes, and continues to just get absolutely pelted on the inside. Fala is a fouler, but again, this matchup, he should be able to pull down 10-10 over 17.5 PRA for Parsa Fala. But if you're looking for a pick 3, and I'll have these up in the tracker, and I'll post them on Twitter as well for those of you who haven't subbed or haven't gotten a chance to sub yet. Will McClendon over 14.5 points plus assists, Jackson McAndrew over 9 points, and Corey McKeithen over 15.5 points. Those are the top 3. Very comfortable. Throw those in a power play. That's hitting. And then best bets wise, I have 2 San Jose State -2 versus Air Force. 2-point favorites on the road. Air Force is bad, real bad. San Jose State not much better, but I think they beat Air Force. Everyone typically does. And the nice thing about San Jose State, they have some nice pieces on their team, but they're coached by Tim Miles. And Tim Miles, some of my most fondest pre-ban DFS years were those Nebraska teams coached by Tim Miles. So near and dear to my heart. And then Tulane, last time we took Tulane +8.5 against UAB. It was my number 1 bet. Did not hit. They lost by 12. Now we're taking the other side here. South Florida's +3.5 versus Tulane. I like this South Florida team a lot. I'll stop short of saying I love them. They have some really nice pieces. Jaden Reed, who's turning into a really strong guard, only a sophomore. They have Jamil Reynolds on his 9th school. Kobe Knox, who can hit some shots. And then they've got this other sophomore by the name of Jimmy Williams, who's starting to come into his own. Ken Palm has it 74-73 in favor of Tulane. I like South Florida to win outright, but give me the 3.5 points versus Tulane. They'll cover, might even win. So +3.5 South Florida side. That is our favorite bet of the day. And then he says, Scott, yeah, man, you know me, and I'm not one to back down or take a safe route. I don't play single entry like most do, and I like to take a stand. And, this 5K James Scott play is going to take us to the promised land here of many green screens. Feel very, very confident in that. Yes, Pittsburgh has size. Yes, their front court can get it done, but they're also undisciplined. I think Scott's really just coming into his own. The existence of Traore now, too, really helps him out to a degree. So get Waterman out of there. Let's play Traore and Scott front court and see what they can do against Corhen and these other bums on Pittsburgh. Huh? All right. I think that'll wrap it up. Lots of hoops all day long. The national championship game for CFB, it'll be here before you know it, January 20th. There will be a show for that, big coverage, huge payouts, prize pools for the showdown. You guys know how I feel about showdown. I don't like it very much unless there's an injury or news we can take advantage of, which those are very, very big print machines when they happen. But we'll obviously be playing showdown for the national championship and find different angles there. So we'll have a show dedicated to that and a write-up. We've been running extremely hot on our CFB bets. And then we'll be back Monday night covering the Tuesday college basketball slate as we get into the heart of the conference season. Lots to do, lots to cover. Articles again Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. Projections and notes every single day. Shows 3 days a week. Hope you liked it. If you did, please drop a like button drop the like button on the way out. Any interactions at all are so very helpful. Best of luck to everybody. Let's go out there and get these green screens. Let's get those window trips. I'm around all day, so if you need me, you can DM me on any of the social media platforms. Love you guys. Appreciate it as always. Let's get after it. I am. Having technical difficulties. That didn't work out. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.